Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about buzzbaits because it is the fall and this is one of the best times to fish a buzzbait. And more specifically, we're going to be talking about the fishing line choices that you have for fishing a buzzbait and some of my thoughts that have kind of evolved over the last few years on what the best fishing line is for fishing these great topwater baits. But first, we have some housekeeping items. First and foremost, I want to welcome you guys to SonarFishing. If you haven't been to this channel before, if you have been to this channel before, thank you for watching these videos. I would like to welcome anybody that is watching right now that hasn't subscribed. If you like the content that you see on this channel, please consider hitting that subscribe button. And another thing is, coming up with content for this channel can be a challenge sometimes. So if you guys have any questions at all, please drop a comment below in any of the videos, even if it doesn't pertain to that specific video. I see all the comments, and if you have a question that you want answered in a video, just put that in one of the comment sections on any of the videos. And if it's a good question, which almost all of them are, I'm going to do a video on it. So I really appreciate you guys and all the support for the channel. Another thing that I want to mention is, again, I'm working with Fish the Moment. They're a great YouTube channel, but they're also an awesome online resource for anglers on fishthemoment.com. And one of the cool things that we're doing on the fishthemoment.com website is we're doing virtual lessons. So you can book myself for an hour, or my buddy Matt Steffen, Kyle Cordiana, Randy Blockett, Jimmy Easterling, any of these anglers that have a lot of different skill sets and strengths, and you can book any of us for an hour. We can talk fishing. It's just one-on-one. So check out the virtual lessons on fishthemoment.com. Finally, I want to mention 44 Tackle, 44tackle.com. That is the official tackle shop for SonarFishing. And so if you guys have any interest in buying any of the products that we're talking about today, go visit 44tackle.com. All right, so now we've done all the housekeeping items, let's talk about buzzbaits. All right, so buzzbaits are pretty unique as far as a topwater bait because they're one of the only topwater presentations that if you stop it, it sinks. There's no buoyancy to these baits at all. So you have to keep them moving on the surface, as opposed to like most traditional topwaters that are either plastic or wood, walking baits, poppers, prop baits, any of those, they are fished on the surface and they float on the surface on the pause. And so because those baits are floating on the surface, you want to use a line that is more buoyant for those techniques. So Braid is a buoyant type of fishing line. It doesn't have any stretch, but it is buoyant. And Monofilament is also a buoyant fishing line that has a lot of stretch. So the other side of the spectrum. And so those two lines, or the combination of those two, have always been kind of the choice for topwater fishing. And I always kind of use those same principles for fishing a buzzbait. I always just use either Braid or Monofilament. I'd go back and forth. I've even tried braided mainline with a Monofilament leader. So I've tried, all those different combinations. I found that I really liked just doing one mainline, so either just straight Braid or straight Monofilament early on. However, the one thing about Braid is the fact that it doesn't have any stretch, which can be a really good thing for a variety of different techniques. But one of the challenges with fishing a buzzbait with Braid is the fact that you have to be on point when it comes to your hook set and make sure that you're not pulling that bait away from those fish. And so when a fish hits, and sometimes they're vicious strikes, you have to not react to it right away. You have to pause and then set the hook. And I just always found that I can control my hook set, and my nerves under pressure pretty good, but there's always that one fish that just catches me by surprise. Maybe it's like right, close to the boat or something like that. And I always missed a few opportunities by using a braid, straight braid with a buzzbait. Now with monofilament, monofilament is a totally different issue. Monofilament is great. It's nice to cast. It feels pretty good, but it also has a ton of stretch in it, which means that when I would set the hook on a fish at a long distance, I didn't feel like I was getting a really good solid hook set, and a lot of times I'd be right because those fish would end up shaking the hook. And if you look at a buzzbait, most buzzbaits have a pretty beefy, hook on there and a pretty large barb on the near the tip of the point. And so because of that large barb on there and just it being a larger diameter hook to begin with, it takes a lot of pressure to be able to set the hook into some of the tough parts of a fish's mouth. And sometimes at the length of a long cast, monofilament just had way too much stretch for me. And sometimes I just find myself reeling so fast to just bring in that slack caused by that stretch, and sometimes I'd lose the fish. So both lines, monofilament and braid, work very well with a buzzbait, can work very well, but I always felt like there was some missed opportunities. And when I really started thinking about it, I was like, well, the buzzbait sinks already. So why do I have to worry about using a line that is buoyant to begin with? Because most of the time, I'm not really, the line isn't really touching the water all that much or laying on the water all that much for it to sink anyways, because you're just constantly got the rod tip up and you're reeling it in. And I was like, well, why am I not using fluorocarbon? Because fluorocarbon is what I love to use for, similar baits that have a similar anatomy, such as a chatterbait or a spinnerbait. Why not use monofilament or fluorocarbon for a buzzbait? And so I started throwing, a fluorocarbon on my buzzbaits, and I found that it was a really, really good compromise. It has just enough stretch to give those fish that added like split second to eat the bait without the angler pulling the buzzbait away from the fish. And it also has just the right lack of stretch to allow you to really horse those fish in, good solid hook set on a long cast and all that. So to me, it seemed like a pretty good balance between all the things that I want in a fishing line for fishing a buzzbait. And honestly, I have not had the first issue with throwing a buzzbait on fluorocarbon. I really, really like it. And I've always liked throwing it on things like, reaction baits such as, spinner baits and chatterbaits and swim jigs and stuff like that, which I think is a very, very similar style of fishing than when you're fishing with a buzzbait anyways. So those are just some of my thoughts. As far as the specific fluorocarbon that I've used Seaguar Red Label, I've used Seaguar Tatsu, and I've ended up settling on Seaguar Abrazex just because I'm fishing a buzzbait generally around cover. So, casting around dock pilings, bumping the bait into the dock pilings, casting around wood, grass, all that kind of stuff. And Abrazex is obviously formulated for that type of environment and fishing around that type of cover. So that's why I use Abrazex, but honestly, you can use the cheapest fluorocarbon that you can find for this technique, because it's not important to have like a small line diameter per pound test rating like it would be with a jerk bait or a crankbait where you're trying to get it down to a specific depth, and something like Red Label or even the new Basics line from Seaguar, which is 200 yards for like $10. Those are all really good choices. The biggest key when you're using fluorocarbon or monofilament in that regard is that I like the bigger diameter. So I don't use really anything less than like 17-pound test generally, you know, unless I'm fishing like a very finesse small buzzbait that is hard to cast with a heavier line. I'll generally, you know, maybe go down if I'm throwing like a 1/8 ounce buzzbait, which I rarely do, maybe down to 12-pound test. But usually for the 1/4 ounce all the way up to half ounce versions that I'm 99% of the time I'm throwing, I'm going to be using 17-pound test minimum, and then 17 or 20-pound test. I mean, you just keep it within that range and you can't go wrong. I don't think you need to go downsize at any time with a buzzbait personally. I think anytime you get any lower than, you know, say 17-pound test or 15-pound test is actually a pretty strong pound test. But once you get down into like 12-pound test, this is again a pretty thick hook and a pretty large barb that you need to get through that, you know, the muscle and the bone of a fish's mouth, and so you don't want to be messing around with any light line. And to me there's really no reason other than maybe casting distance. That's the only variable that I can think of that may dictate you wanting to go down in line size. But again, if you were making a long cast with a buzzbait and you had 10 or 12-pound test on, and you get a big fish on a very long cast, you're gonna have a really hard time getting a good hook set and also not breaking that fish off with that much you know, line out. But anyways, those are my thoughts on fishing a buzzbait and what type of fishing line to use with a buzzbait. I'd like to hear your opinion on my opinion of the using fluorocarbon for a buzzbait, and I'd like to hear what you guys like to throw with your buzzbaits and why. So anyways, those are my thoughts. Hope you like this video. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. I'm gonna see you guys out on the water. Take care.